In today's video we're going to be reviewing and reinforcing some of the basic image editing skills that we've learned over the past few videos. We're going to be looking at levels, hue saturation and also cropping. Now the first thing I want to do when I open up my image is get a closer look at the image itself. So I'm going to start by using the zoom tool. Now I can hold Z on my keyboard and use Photoshop CS5's scrubby tool. By moving left and right I can move in and out of the picture. I can then press the space bar, keep hold of that and then click and drag to navigate around the picture. And what I'm doing here right now is I'm just looking at the image in detail. This will give me a better idea of what I actually want to do to the picture. Now when we approach editing any kind of image, there's a certain set of stages that we like to work through. It's called a workflow. Now essentially the first thing I would do is always look at the levels. So I'm going to start by going to Image, Adjustments and Levels. Now by looking at the histogram I see we have some area here near the shadows and some area here near the highlights which currently is empty, and by clicking and dragging the shadow slider to the beginning point of the histogram and doing the same with the highlight slider, I'm going to create an image with a better range of levels, and this is going to give me a little bit more contrast in the image. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit so we can see the entire picture and how the levels is affecting this image. So let's go back to how we were, and this time I'm going to press the Alt key and I'm going to drag in, and this way I'm checking for clipping. So if you remember, clipping is where we have too much intensity in the shadows and we lose information. So we're getting a little bit of clipping there where it's black, and I'm just going to ease off, and that looks good. I'm going to do the same with the highlights. When we start to see pure white, that means we are blowing out the highlights and we are clipping those areas. So just going to come back a little bit just where it starts. That looks good. And then I'm also going to adjust the midtones and bring out a little bit more detail in the shadow areas. Now that looks really good to me. We've got more contrast, and also by adjusting the levels we've increased the saturation slightly in the image as well. Let's OK that. Let's do a Command and Z or Control and Z if you're on a PC to see the before and the after. Now we can see straight away just by doing a levels adjustment on that image it looks far better. Now the next step I want to do is I just want to play with the saturation and also the hue slightly. What I'd like to do is I'd like to change the hue of his shirt and of the sky to something more of a cyan stroke and aqua style of colour. So let's do that. Let's go to Image, Adjustments, Hue Saturation, and let's zoom in as well to our picture so we get a nice view of what we're doing. Now I'm not wanting to affect the skin tones or the whites in the image, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to specifically select the blues. Okay, so only the blue areas will be affected. And now when I adjust the hue, we'll notice that the grass and the skin tones stay exactly the same, but we're only affecting the blue areas, and in this case it is the shirt and it is the sky and also some of the markings on the ball. So I want to go for something like that. That looks great, and I'm also wanting to increase the saturation slightly in the grass area as well. So this time I'll click on yellows. Now I could click on greens, but from experience I know that most grass and foliage when we're looking at images actually contains more yellow than it does green. So I'm going to select yellows and I'm going to increase the saturation around about plus 15 looks good. Let's just zoom out and see what we're getting. That looks great, and I'm happy with that, so I'm going to OK that. Let's do a Command and Z. There we had the before, the hue saturation adjustment, and now there we have the after. Now of course this is all to do with personal choice and personal preference. You may like this version as opposed to this. I quite like this version, and so I'm happy with the levels, happy with the hue and saturation. The last thing to do is to see whether we can improve the composition, maybe adjust the framing slightly to give us a little bit more intimacy between ourselves and the subject, the player, the footballer here. So I'm going to get my crop tool, and I'm just going to drag a box around my player roughly at first, and then I can adjust this afterwards. I'm going to see if I can find a little bit more of an interesting composition. I want the player to be a little bit larger in the image as he is now. There's quite a lot of negative space here, which is good in that it makes the player stand out against the background, but I think we've got a little bit too much here, so I'm just going to create a little bit more of a tighter crop here using my rule of thirds intersection lines to balance my composition, and that looks pretty good to me. Let's enter that and zoom in. Super. Let's use another picture now and follow the same principles. So first of all, I'm going to just zoom in and see what we've got here. Yep, we've got this lovely sunset here. We've got some nice oranges. I do think that we could intensify the saturation of the orange hues some more, and also add some more depth and darkness, a bit more contrast in the silhouette landscape here, just to make this image pop a little bit more. So let's start by going image, adjustments, let's do our levels check again. Yep, we can see we can bring in the slider here. Let's hold down the Alt key, make sure we don't get any clipping, so around about there looks pretty good just before it starts to clip. And let's do the same with the highlights, bring that in around about there, and let's just increase the midtones a little bit there, and I'm happy with that. Let's OK that. Let's look at the before and the after, giving it a little bit more of a pop there. Let's do a image, adjustments, hue saturation next, and I'm actually going to adjust the global saturation. I want all of the different hues, the yellows, the oranges, maybe a bit of this blue, all of the hues to increase in saturation. So I'm just going to give that a little bit of a boost. Let's see how the image will look if we adjust the hues a little bit more, maybe over to the right, over to the left. I quite like the original hues there, but I might just there, -3. I like that little bit of a bit more intense, almost like a reddy orange here coming through near the bottom. Let's just up the saturation just a little bit more, and let's OK that. Compositionally, I'm not going to do anything with the composition. I'm quite happy with that. If I really wanted to change the composition, maybe I would create kind of like a widescreen panoramic look here. That could be quite interesting. Actually, I really like that. That works really well. So yeah, I'm going to keep that as my composition. We've got a lot more focus on the silhouette here of this little hut and this man standing in this porch area. That looks fantastic. And there we've applied again a levels and a hue saturation adjustment and a crop to our image, improving the image. And we're going to save that. Save this as sunset edit, and we're going to make sure that's a JPEG, maximum quality of 12, and we can OK that as well. So there we've summarized and we've reviewed and reinforced some of the skills that we've learnt previously on basic image editing, using the levels, the hue saturation and the crop command to improve our images.